O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
And so there's aspects with David Icke's worldview that we as Christians who've dove down these rabbit holes, done the psychedelics, peeked our head into the sort of magical corners that exist in the conspiracy world, or really all these different rabbit holes. And now we've kind of come to the conclusion of traditional Christianity. And I think as we watch his videos today, those who have been watching my channel or following the content and diving into a lot of the stuff we talk about, it's going to be jarring hearing David Icke talk, because it's going to be, in a sense, kind of laughable. His worldview is not solidified. We've talked about a paradigm as a metaphysics, an epistemology, and an ethics, or a sort of moral structure. And as we listen to him talk, he's certainly going to make moral and ethical claims. At other points, he's going to insinuate a sort of what I call monistic dualism. Again, that left and right, good and bad, they sort of necessitate each other's existence. Is also called compatible dualism, where the dualism, the good and evil, right, the bifurcation, the dialectic, that this is compatible, but that, again, it's the yin and yang. It's just another term for monistic dualism. But he's going to make lots of moral and ethical claims regarding the global elite, how they're trying to trap us. And then he's also going to believe in reincarnation, as we're going to see, which is totally consistent, as we've talked about, with Eastern mystical traditions. Generally speaking, a lot of traditions that, as we would argue, have a relativistic epistemology, have difficulty justifying and grounding their metaphysical foundations and how it is they come to know things. So for David Icke, it's going to be a hodgepodge of different things. And I think, again, it's so funny. So many of us had this worldview. So many of us, dove down these belief systems. And at the same time, now we're looking at 2022, and we have our own understanding of, again, the global reset, how this is a spiritual reality. David Icke's going to talk consistently about energies, vibrations, and again, our Christian worldview, again, Orthodox Christian theology here. I know we've got some new people that have joined the channel here, and so I want to be explicit, because there's been, I've had multiple people kind of give lip service that, oh yeah, I love the Orthodox theology, but I don't go to church. I'm not even Protestant, but yeah, I'm Orthodox. Well, you're not Orthodox. But what we do here is we promote Orthodox Christian theology because it is different than Western Christianity. And we're going to see many aspects that David Icke appeals to or likes. We're going to find really sort of misunderstandings of our Orthodox Christian theology and worldview. So some of the main points that we're going to be hitting, again, as I said, is spiritual henosis, that as we listen to David Icke, as so many of these different spiritual worldviews, there's a privileging of unity over multiplicity. Now, for some of you, you may be listening to that, and that doesn't sound like that's a big deal. Privileging unity, multiplicity, okay, big deal. Well, this is something that I've talked about, and this is part of my own academic research, is looking at these worldviews and how many worldviews, how many paradigms actually privilege unity over multiplicity. And one of the most indicative of this is Neoplatonism. And so the Neoplatonic one, again, a Platonic structure of emanation, and that we're all on these concentric circles outside the one singular dot right there in the middle, and that we're all then trying to move back to the one. This is David Icke's worldview, essentially. And so he believes, and he says quite explicitly, that you're not who you think you are. Your body is bad. You thinking that you're a man is bad. You believing in a religion or coming from a culture and being limited, all this stuff is bad, because what you are is unified consciousness. You are universal consciousness. You are infinity and eternity wrapped up in a body just to experience your own creation, right? The typical New Age rhetoric that we hear, that you are God and you basically are the sentient apparatus of the universe, and you then are perceiving and experiencing yourself. Oh, how convenient. Everything is myself. But the fact that everything is yourself is indicative, again, of the unity over multiplicity. It's the dissolving of boundaries and trying to create these paradigms which unify all things as one. And we're going to see this absolutely being consistent with David Icke's worldview. But he takes it in a different way, because he's going to be very Gnostic in his worldview. And so what do I mean by Gnosticism? And so many of us have different understandings. And so let me explain what I mean by Gnosticism. Is there's a few characteristics of ancient Gnosticism that I think are consistent even among the variety of schools. And so when we talk about Gnosticism, there are tons of Gnostic schools. There's the Valentinian school, the Sethian school, the Ophites, the Borborites, the medieval Cathars, the Polycynians in Armenia, the Tondrakians in Armenia. Tons of different Gnostic groups. Well, what is it that unifies them all as Gnostic? And it has to do with their hermeneutic or their exegetical approach to the Old Testament. Is that they believe, in general Gnostic worldview, believes that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are two separate deities. And this is a heresy known as Marcionism, that Marcion also believed this idea. And so the general Gnostic framework then is that Christ, Jesus Christ, is coming from the realm of pure light. And he enters into space and time to rescue us from a demonic creation. And so the Gnostic understanding of the creation of the world that we live in right now, is actually demonic. It's actually a trap. It's actually God did not create this, a demiurgic creation, a sort of bastard child, Yaldabaoth, Beelzebub. The bastard child of Sophia created this world. And so the general idea is that there is a God, there's a realm of pure light, there is Sophia, and Sophia gives birth to a sort of bastard child known as Yaldabaoth or Beelzebub. And then it is this creature that creates the universe, creates the world it is that we know it as. And it's this creature then that the Gnostics understood as the devil. So for them, the devil created the world, and therefore Christ came down from the realm of pure light to show people that we have to break through, we have to break out of this and make our way existentially through gnosis, through knowledge. And you're going to hear David Icke reiterate the same claim, because he's going to say, "Oh, reincarnation isn't true because you don't have to come back and learn more lessons." Yet at the same time, within just the next sentence, he's going to say that the ways in which you don't reincarnate is to gain the knowledge that you are universal consciousness. So again, very typical of Eastern mysticism, basically, and this is why it's so interesting that I'm doing this stream, because hopefully Sunday we'll be doing the third stream on an introduction to world religions. We're going to focus on Hinduism, because David Icke's worldview is basically just taking aspects of Hinduism and then sort of reorienting them in a sort of New Agey, Gnostic, techno worldview. And you're going to watch as he presents them, you're going to think he reinvented the wheel. I mean, he's going to be laying this on you like he is just, because this is his new book. The new book is that the simulation is a trap, reincarnation is real, and we're being trapped inside creation, and that creation itself is evil. This is basically his big brained idea that he's putting forth. And so you can see then the Gnostic elements, how that is very Gnostic, because the Gnostics believe that nature and creation was bad in essence. And therefore, how do we transcend this world to get back to the realm of the pure light? That is where these different Gnostic groups then varied in their understandings of how to do that. Some of them, as I've talked about with like the Borborites or the Carpocratians, they would violate what we would consider like morality or moral transgressions. So they would have orgies, they would have homosexual activities, they would partake in Eucharistic meals that involve semen and menstrual blood and feces. And this was a way, as we would understand in a magical worldview, is that I transgress any boundary that would then limit myself. And we're going to see this concept of limits, again, be prevalent within David Icke's worldview, that any concept of yourself as a man or a human, this is a limitation. And so you have to break free from the limits. Now, he's not obviously advocating for Borborite or Carpocratian Eucharistic activity. But the point is, how do then we break free? How do we existentially, through our own will, break free from this demonic creation? That is then where ritualistic theurgic magic, the transgressions of moral boundaries. Some of the Gnostics wouldn't engage in sex because they believed that to have sex would to bring a soul into matter, a piece of light into matter, which then is trapped. So they would engage in oral sex, and anal sex were typically not forbidden in some of these Gnostic groups because they would not lead to reproduction. Some of the Gnostic groups absolutely abstain from all sexual activity, oral, sodomy, normal, all of it. So it depends on which Gnostic school you're talking about, depends on what methods they use to break free, existentially move through and break free from this demonic creation. And so keep that in mind, because David Icke's, again, general framework is that nature and physics are the code to the simulation. So he's making a very straightforward claim that we're going to see in these videos, that he believes we are absolutely in a simulation, and it's created by an architect. Now, one of the problems with simulation theory, just philosophically, some of the philosophers that have already criticized simulation, and it's not even a theory, that's the thing, it's a hypothesis. It hasn't even risen to the level to be considered a quote-unquote theory by other intellectuals. But if there is an architect that created a simulation, the first question would be, well, by what reality is the architect existing in? Because if the architect is building the simulation, what reality is he? Is he in a simulation? Is he in actual reality, baseline reality? Well, this, again, it's an infinite regress to some degree, which is, again, why Aristotle, you have to have an unmoved mover. Eventually, you have to have a God. Eventually, you have to have something that is outside the simulation or the creation itself. Guys, smash that like if you could. We got almost 100 people here. Please smash that like. Again, and please support the stream. If you'd like to super chat, please use the Streamlabs link or use YouTube if you prefer. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping here in just a minute when I finish this monologue, and then we'll dive into these videos, I promise. So he believes nature and physics is the code to the simulation. Now, another problem with the simulation hypothesis is that the general framework, and you've heard Elon Musk, and I could have got a bunch of Elon Musk stuff, but I'm not going to. But Elon Musk talks about how he believes in the simulation theory. And Elon Musk, basically, the basis of the simulation hypothesis is that based on processing power, video processing power, such as video games, for example, from the 1970s to 2022, that the rate of increase, if you extrapolate that further, that would eventually insinuate that potentially we could then simulate reality to the same degree of which we experience it now for individual persons, whether it be a headset or whatnot. And so the idea is that if technology and video game production and all this stuff is accelerating at such an nth degree, then probabilistically, if you extrapolate further, then that would mean eventually there could be a simulation. And if that's the case, maybe we're in a simulation. This is the whole thing. The problem with that is the simulation also believes that there could be multiple simulations happening, right? There could be multiple universes, multiple worlds, right? If you look into space and the different planets, they could all be in their own simulation. So then that begs the question, well, what do all these worlds, all these simulated worlds have in common? They all can simulate themselves, but that requires an advanced point of technology. And if we're in a simulation, that means all the simulated worlds can simulate themselves, yet we agree that we do not have the processing power to actually exist in a simulation. So that then says we're either at baseline reality, the world that we live in now, and that there are potential simulations in the future, or the whole thing's just junk, and it doesn't make any sense because there would be no simulated universe within their own understandings of human progress and technology without there first being a universe that was not simulated. Do you get my point? Then the question comes in, which one are we in? And then you have multiple physicists and philosophers totally debunking and disproving the simulated hypothesis. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The other one is, so I wanted to point then, if he believes nature and physics is a simulation, he also assumes that physical reality is an illusion. This is, as we'll get into this Sunday when we dive into Hinduism, this is a Sanskrit term called Maya, M-A-Y-A, and it's just a term for physical reality being sort of illusory. It's a veil, right? And that the spiritual realities that are occurring behind the veil of physicality, the veil of materiality, is what's ultimately real. And this is a term theologically within Hinduism called Maya. And basically that's what David Icke believes in. Of course, he just calls it the simulation to keep up with the 21st century. Now, the next point is Gnostic Existentialism. His whole thing is that we have to, through our own will and our own desire for knowledge, break free from this reincarnating simulation. That we are all reincarnating within the simulation because the simulation is here to control us. Now, the problem would be is if that's the case, why does the simulation want to take out 90% of the planet? So there's, and then he would dive into the satanic elite, but then he has no objective morality. So it's very weird because David Icke refers to the elites as satanic over and over and over. They're satanic, they're evil, they're whatever. Okay, why is that bad? Because if we're all just universal consciousness, and if all this is really just an illusion and it's all a simulation, what exactly is the point? Why would it be bad? And his whole thing is, well, if you don't realize your universal consciousness, when you die, you're going to reincarnate back into the simulation. Okay, so the reality then is an illusion. The Gnostic existentialism is that we break free from this simulation by realizing your infinite and universal consciousness. This is what sets you free, according to David Icke. And so there we see the Gnostic, again, gnosis is the term for Gnostic. It's the privileging of spiritual knowledge. We've talked about this in the Introduction to World Religions course. Gnosis is a term, Greek term for spiritual knowledge. Knowledge, generally speaking, but the way it's used in English vernacular is spiritual knowledge. So then we have the Gnostic aversion to materiality and the body, because we'll also watch videos here of David Icke talking about how bad the body is. You know, the body's bad, materiality's bad, because this is all considered for him part of the simulation. Now, we believe God created it, and we definitely privilege biology over technology. And the inversion of doing away with the biology in favor of the technology is exactly what the transhumanists are in favor of. And I know that David Icke is also not a transhumanist, and he recognized a lot of that stuff, and he spoke accurately in regards to the coof and not getting the jibby jab, right? So that's what's going to be interesting here as we watch his videos, is that there's aspects that we absolutely agree with in regards to the global control, the global elite, the one world government, secret societies, major corporations, the global reset, all this stuff. He's also on that page. But his beginning presuppositions, the spiritual paradigm, totally takes him into a different direction. One that we would argue as traditional Christians, he's actually participating in a sort of spiritual paradigm of the elite, of the sort of the henosis, the demonic henosis, the unity over multiplicity. So he's against the one world government, but he's also in favor of all of us waking up and realizing we're unitary consciousness and forgetting that I'm David Patrick Harry, because that's an illusion. And so at a paradigmatic level, it's not that different. To me, it's all demonic henosis. Then we have, he doesn't believe in a soul. So he talks about how the soul is part of the simulation, and that he basically just redefines terms here because the soul insinuates personhood. And this is generally true across traditions, that the soul, even within Hinduism, it's a little bit different because in Buddhism they have the an-atman, so they don't have a soul. They have the absence of a soul, and what is perceived as a soul is the collection of karma. In Hinduism, generally speaking, they have the atman, Sanskrit term for soul. And so they believe that the reincarnating process of reincarnation is part of the soul's journey, and that the soul has to have experiences to acquire more spiritual information to then reach enlightenment, to then attain moksha, which is a releasement from samsara, which is the cycle of death and rebirth. Now, he doesn't believe in a soul, and he basically adopts this entire framework, but he says, no, the soul's an illusion. Why? Because he says, well, no, we're just pure spirit. Because the soul insinuates a sort of personhood. And again, whether he's conscientious of it or not, he privileges unity over multiplicity. And so we're going to see how he totally rejects the concept of a soul for the concept that he redefines spirit, not Holy Spirit here, but spirit or universal spirit, because that's what we are. So therefore, he redefines, he doesn't like soul because that insinuates a uniqueness amongst peoples, Therefore, we're just all universal souls. Universal spirits, universal consciousness, the abstraction. So he privileges the abstraction and he privileges the unity, things that we've seen a lot. Again, the loss of personhood or orthodox theology is trying to maintain multiplicity, the uniqueness of my substantiation as a human, while unifying mystically with God. So it's unity and multiplicity. And then he believes, like I said, reincarnation is real, but it's an evil trap. So he talks about how I read that stuff. It's so stupid. Reincarnation's so dumb. Yet then he says, based on all the books he's read of people knowing about their past lives, that then reincarnation is real. And so he goes both ways on that, as you'll see. And then finally, as I said, he has no objective ethic or morality, and that his framework then is that the architects basically there's just a hierarchy of what he calls archons, and so he makes another jump that I don't think is actually accurate or feasible as a religious studies scholar. He says, well, the Gnostic archons are the same thing as the Greek pantheon of pagan gods. Well, not really. I mean, you can understand. Not really. I mean, many Greeks believed that, look at Socrates. He believed that the pagan pantheon of the Greeks was sort of anthropomorphizations of human emotions and natural processes in the world. That was Socrates. So is that the same thing as the Gnostic archons that believe that in a sort of inverted? I mean, you could find some similarities, but again, major leaps there. Major leaps there that I don't think is actually a logical follow. So the points that we are going to agree with David Icke here is that there's a satanic global elite. Absolutely agree with that. That there are people in power that somehow are receiving more and more power, whether that be wealth or institutional influence or whatever, by, in a way, selling their soul. But again, he doesn't believe in a soul. And he has a real problem with the whole theodicy, a theological term for the explanation for the existence of evil. So he has a real problem with theodicy and ethics and morality, but he keeps talking about a satanic evil elite that basically get power from what he calls the archons, or what I call Satan. And so basically agree there. He talks about interdimensional entities that he calls the reptilians. Well, I call them demons. And so are they reptiles? Are they lizard people with heads? Not really. They're just they're beings that aren't within the sort of space and time. They're outside of this in a sort of parallel realm. And, even within our own tradition as Christians, the sort of serpentine and allegories of Satan that, maybe there's something there with the reptiles, how they get warmth from the sun. They actually don't produce their own heat. Maybe that is a sort of archetype for something. I don't know. But yeah, so to some degree, we could understand even the far stretch on his lizard people. Well, they're kind of demons. And so he talks about possession and the reptilians possessing people. Again, that's just demonic possession for us. We don't have to go into these sort of secular material interpretations of the lizard people to make sense of it. In regards to COVID, the coof, the plandemic, the stabbies, the jibby jabs, totally on point with this. We probably would not disagree with David Icke at all on those points. Totally, and I think he was a great voice early in 2020 speaking out against this stuff. So God bless him and his family. I'm sure he took some heat for that, but I think he really spoke accurately in regards to the coof, the pandemic, and how it's going to rate to the World Economic Forum, Dr. Klaus Schwab, the Great Reset, Bill Gates, the jibby jabs, the testing, all this stuff. He was pretty on point. So we can definitely agree with him with the COVID. And the last thing that we can definitely agree with him is the one world order, and that there's been an agenda, whether it be climate change or whatnot, the reorganizing the economic structure, that there's an attempt to organize a one world government. He also believes this stuff, and so we can definitely agree with him there. So I just want to give credit where credit is due. There's aspects of David Icke that we're going to agree with, and there's going to be then many aspects of his Gnostic interpretation that we're going to disagree with.